I know it's time consuming to follow the alternate media that sometimes brings the most wonderful interviews to you. Today, I separated two small pieces, two interviews done just recently, and they have very, very important dates. Only 2 weeks from now, and we'll see if those dates are coming true or not. Watch until the end, subscribe, and share it with your friends.
Donald Trump is inheriting the whole mess. He's in a trap. Today, the debt is $20 trillion. It's 106% of GDP. Unlike in Reagan's time, we were looking at a budget surplus by the mid-1980s, so there was room for some of this, fiscal excess. Today, Trump, whether he knows it or not, and I don't think he's really paid nearly enough attention to the fundamentals of the budget, he's inheriting a built-in deficit of $10 trillion over the next decade under current policies that are built in. And yet he wants more defense spending, not less. He wants a drastic sweeping tax cuts, both corporate and individual. He wants to spend more money on border security and law enforcement. He's going to do more for the veterans. He wants this big infrastructure, $1 trillion infrastructure program. When you put all that together, it's madness. It doesn't even begin to add up, and it won't happen when you're struggling with the 20 trillion or the 10 trillion of debt that's coming down the pike and the 20 trillion that's already on the books. And so what I think people are missing is a big date that I tell everyone to keep in mind. March 15th, 2017. That's the day that this debt ceiling holiday that Obama and Boehner kind of put together right before the last election in October 2015, that holiday expires. The debt ceiling will freeze in at 20 trillion. It will then be law. It'll be a hard stop. The Treasury will have 200 billion roughly of cash. We're burning cash at a 75 billion a month rate. By summer, they'll be out of cash. We'll be in the mother of all debt ceiling crises. Everything will grind to a halt. I think we'll have a government shutdown. There will be no Obamacare repeal and replace. There will be no tax cut. There will be no infrastructure stimulus. There will be just one giant fiscal bloodbath over a debt ceiling that has to be increased, and no one wants to vote for it. Now, when the market begins to understand that that is what's coming down the pike and not this nirvana of, the second coming of Ronald Reagan, I think the bullish optimism, which is utterly unfounded at the moment, will dissipate very quickly. And then, and here's the second point, they are going to raise interest rates on March 15th. They have to. I'm talking about the Fed. They dithered for 100 months. This is totally ridiculous. So you're going to be in an environment in which there is no more stimulus coming from the money printers at the Fed, and in which the vaunted Trump fiscal stimulus, or handoff of the fiscal baton of the stimulus baton to the fiscal side, will clearly not be happening. And then, as I say, the markets will discover, and I don't even think they're markets anymore, it's just a casino where a lot of gamblers show up. The casino will discover that it's home alone. Washington isn't there for one more, go around of this fantasy, and then the rubber will meet the road, as they say. The day of reckoning will happen. I expect the market will easily correct by 20%, and probably a lot more. And I think it's going to begin, as I say, March 15, when it becomes clear exactly where we are and not in this fantasy that is being lived every day in the casino. Well, I think there are going to be coronaries, but it will likely not be in the bond pits, but on Capitol Hill. And what I mean is that when they run out of cash, it is true, Donald Trump is one pretty rough and tough hombre. I'll give him credit for that. He is one negotiator like the world has seldom seen. Some people think, he's pretty reckless when push comes to shove. But he is not going to roll over and agree to whatever Capitol Hill demands in order to get a debt ceiling increase. He's going to face them down. And I have great regard for Mick Mulvaney, the new budget director who was just confirmed a couple of days ago, who has clearly understood that when the Treasury runs out of cash and the debt ceiling has been used up and you can't borrow anymore. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that we have, on a typical month, 250 to 300 billion of revenue coming in. That will easily cover the debt service per month. That will readily cover Social Security and other critical payments. But when it comes to paying grants to state and local governments or contractors for the Army Corps of Engineers or the Pentagon or a whole range of other activities, if you don't have the cash, you put the bills in the drawer. And I think that is what's going to shock the system, and it will scare the living bejesus out of Wall Street and the financial markets, because then you won't have a sudden clarification and resolution of the problem. It could go on for days and weeks. In the past, since no president has been advised to allocate spending, it comes to a inflection point. Somebody blinks, they pass a resolution in the wee hours of the night, and the government goes on its merry way, spending and borrowing against the new ceiling. This time, this summer, there is going to be day after day of uncertainty as to who's going to blink, what the deal is, who's getting paid, who isn't, what bills are building up in the drawers, and which ones aren't. This is going to be, a maelstrom, if I can use that word, like we've never seen before. And the markets are not even remotely prepared for this. As people have said, fundamentals don't matter anymore. Nothing is being discounted. It's all machines, raging robo machines and day traders thinking that somebody is going to come to their rescue, no matter how absurd the bubble gets or how extended the whole system becomes. After all, right now the S&P 500 is trading at 26 times earnings, and earnings have been going down for the last 6 or 7 quarters. There is no big booming recovery coming, and that's another big thing, that I think is important to compare with what we had in the early 80s. In the first year and a half, we got through the liquidation of the inflation mess that had built up, and we started with a new business cycle. This one is 94 months old, I believe, right now, and no one's outlawed the business cycle. So there is going to be a recession, and there's going to be no stimulus baton left to bail it out. And I think that's the new fact that neither Trump nor the Wall Street gamblers really even remotely understand. I think he does not yet understand the magnitude of the problem, the intractability of what he's inheriting. He's been going around talking to CEOs of defense contractors and saying, well, let's renegotiate the F-35 and I'm going to save $600 million. They're all selling him a used car. This stuff isn't real. It's things that were in the pipeline already, or it's accounting razzmatazz. So he doesn't realize that this problem he's inheriting is 1,000 times greater than anything he ever imagined. This is a monster. He doesn't want to cut Social Security. That's $1 trillion a year, not even for the wealthy punters who live on his golf courses. He hasn't thought that through. He's telling, the retired population, we're not going to touch Medicare. That's $600 billion a year. You can't do that. He says to the veterans, we're not doing enough for you. I sympathize with the veterans, but we're spending $185 billion a year already. Now, what does he propose to cut? He wants to get rid of wouldn't even add up to an hour. So he's going to be in for a pretty heavy-duty, harsh education as he gets into the budget in the next few weeks. And what I think is going to happen is, government isn't conducted, in some soundproof, site-proof, hidden chamber. Everything leaks, and we're learning in the Trump administration, they're as leak-prone as any I've seen since 1980. I think we're going to have a greater depression in the stock market than we've had since 1987, when it dropped 25% in one day at the beginning of this whole Greenspan era of what I call bubble finance. But I think what's out of kilter today is far more the financial economy than the Main Street economy. And so the big correction that I'm talking about is in, the 62 trillion of debt outstanding in the country, the 30 or 35 trillion of stock market value in the various indices, and counting all 5,000 or 6,000 publicly traded stocks, however many they are. The big adjustment and crunch is going to come there. Now, it will spill over into the real economy. But one of the silver linings of this phony recovery that we've had since the crisis of 2008 is that Main Street really hasn't recovered. So there isn't a big bubble there of jobs and production and income and living standard elevation or growth that's going to be taken away. They never did recover. The only strong recovery that we've had is in the financial markets, and that's where the next big Greater Depression, as you call it, is really going to happen.
We're going to go through a period of disruption here from March through May, and then a slight hiatus, and then another period that's going to be even worse from, say, end of July through to the end of the year. During that period of time, I expect things like the stocks, especially, to be very hammered by what Bill Holter calls truth bombs. So there's going to be a couple of different impacts on mining. Some mining companies are going to turn out to be pristine, and so it'll, unbeknownst to them, just the fact that they did good business and weren't hypothecated is going to result in an influx of capital their direction, because, see, the data is showing us that this issue of fake stocks, where there's 5 or 10 times as many stocks as have actually been issued on some companies, is really going to come to the fore in this second half of our little period of disruption. And so we're going to have all these sort of, within the mining industry, trends that are going to affect us that way. And then on the other side of it is, from what we're viewing here, is going to be an upward pressure on price, and maybe even kicking into something close to hyperinflation as we go through late summer and into fall. A lot of new data relative to the new administration and the potential to derail the planned hyperinflation. So if you were to look at the last 20 years and the moves of the power elite in the Federal Reserve, you might think, perhaps rightly so, that there was an intent to cause certain things to occur within the dollar. Our data at the moment is showing that, very much like the 1930s, the dollar is going to strengthen. Very much like the 1930s, the dollar will strengthen even as gold and silver rise.